Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Anaya Remote Javali and I'm a foundation level student at Rehan School. So today I will ask some questions for Maya on the topic of how do remote jobs help the environment. So let's get started. So hi Maya, how are you?
Walaikum assalam. I'm doing great. I'm so ready to dive into this with you. It's such a fascinating angle to look at.
Okay, so my first question from you is that why does working from home reduce pollution?
The biggest factor is definitely the commute. When you take millions of cars off the road every morning and evening, you're cutting down on a massive amount of carbon emissions and smog. It's basically a giant collective breath of fresh air for the planet.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how do remote jobs lower carbon emissions?
It mostly comes down to energy use. Beyond just the cars, think about the massive office buildings. When people work from home, you don't need to heat, cool, and light those giant skyscrapers to the same extent. Fewer commutes and smaller office footprints mean way less fuel being burned and less electricity being pulled from the grid.
Okay, so my next question from you is that uh, how does remote work reduce traffic on roads?
Um, It's pretty simple math. Fewer people needing to get to a physical office means fewer cars on the highway. When you remove the rush hour requirement for a huge chunk of the workforce, the congestion just drops. It turns those bumper to bumper nightmares into a much smoother ride for the people who actually still have to be on the road.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how do remote jobs help reduce fuel consumption?
It's a direct Right, fuel consumption. It's a direct domino effect. When you eliminate the daily drive to the office, you're using significantly less gasoline or diesel. Multiply that by millions of people, and you've got a massive reduction in the amount of fuel being pumped and burned every single day.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how remote work helps fight climate change and how?
It really boils down to reducing our overall carbon footprint by cutting out the daily commute and downsizing the energy needed to run massive corporate offices. We're emitting far fewer greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. When you slow down the rate at which we pump CO2 into the air, you're essentially taking the pressure off the planet's climate system. It's a way of aligning how we earn a living with the actual health of the earth.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how do remote jobs save energy?
It's all about efficiency. Like I mentioned with those skyscrapers, running a massive office building is an energy hog. When people work remotely, you don't need to power huge HVAC systems, elevators, and thousands of lights across 20 floors. Plus, many people are more mindful of their energy use at home, and companies can move toward smaller, more energy efficient hubs instead of giant corporate campuses.
Okay, so my next question from you is that why do remote workers produce less pollution?
It's mostly because they're stripping away the hidden pollutants of a traditional job between the lack of exhaust from a car and the reduction in waste from things like disposable office supplies or those single-use coffee cups people grab during their commute. The daily environmental cost is just much lower.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how do remote jobs reduce the need of office buildings?
And companies realize they don't need a desk for every single employee every single day. The whole concept of the office changes. They can switch to smaller satellite offices or co-working spaces where people only meet up when they actually need to collaborate in person. Since the demand for those massive multi-story headquarters drops, we stop seeing so many of those energy draining concrete giants being built and maintained.
Okay, so my next question from you is that does remote work help save electricity and why?
Absolutely. It's that same pattern of downsizing. When you don't have to power a massive corporate headquarters with its industrial sized lighting, cooling systems, and endless rows of electronics, the total electricity draw drops significantly. Even if a few more lights are on at home, it doesn't come close to the sheer amount of power it takes to keep a skyscraper humming 24/7.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how does working from home reduce waste?
It's a lot of the little things that add up. Think about the amount of paper, plastic water bottles, and those single use coffee pods that pile up in a corporate break room. When you're at home, you're more likely to use a real mug and handle your own waste more mindfully. Plus, you're not relying on the massive amount of packaging and waste that comes with maintaining a giant physical office site.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how do online meetings help the environment?
They basically kill the need for business travel. Instead of flying across the country or driving for hours to a different city for a 1 hour meeting, you just hop on a call. When you remove those flights and long distance trips from the equation, you're cutting out a huge amount of jet fuel and carbon emissions. It's way more sustainable to move the data than to move the people.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how do remote jobs help protect natural resources?
That happens in a few different ways. First, by reducing the demand for massive office buildings, we're using fewer raw materials like steel, concrete, and glass, the production of which is actually pretty hard on the planet. Then there's the reduction in paper waste since everything goes digital. Even the land we save is a factor. Fewer parking lots and sprawling corporate campuses mean more room for natural habitats to actually exist.
Okay, so my next question from you is that can remote work reduce noise pollution?
For sure. Think about the constant roar of highway traffic and the honking in downtown areas during rush hour. When you have thousands of people staying home instead of idling in traffic, the actual noise levels in cities drop, makes the environment a lot more peaceful for the people and the wildlife living in those urban spaces.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how does remote work help cities become greener?
It changes the whole layout of a city. When you don't need massive parking lots and towering office blocks everywhere, cities have the freedom to repurpose that space. You start seeing more urban gardens, more parks, and more walkable neighborhoods instead of just concrete jungles designed for cars. It shifts the focus from serving commuters to actually serving the people who live there.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how do remote jobs reduce traffic jams?
It's a numbers game. When you remove the forced migration of thousands of people moving toward the same center at the exact same time every morning, the bottleneck just disappears. Without that concentrated surge of cars, the roads can actually breathe and those stagnant lines of traffic start to move again.
Okay, so my next question from you is that why is reducing traffic important for the environment?
Because idling cars are basically just pollution machines. When traffic is backed up, engines are running but not moving, which pumps out way more emissions per mile than a car moving at a steady speed. Plus, it reduces the constant wear and tear on the roads, which means less frequent construction and fewer resources spent on repairs.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how do remote jobs lower greenhouse gas emissions?
It's a combined effect between the lack of daily car exhaust and the reduced energy needed to power massive office complexes. You're cutting the primary sources of carbon dioxide and methane. Since those gases act like a blanket, trapping heat in our atmosphere, lowering the amount we produce is the most direct way to slow down global warming.
Okay, so my next question from you is that can remote work encourage a more sustainable life?
I really think so. When you aren't rushing through a high stress commute, you actually have the mental space and time to make better choices. You might cook more meals at home instead of grabbing fast food in plastic packaging, or you might have the energy to start a garden or walk more in your own neighborhood. It shifts your rhythm from survival mode to a pace where you can actually think about the footprint you're leaving.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how does remote why do remote workers use fewer disposable items?
It's all about the environment you're in. When you're in your own kitchen, you've got your own mugs, plates, and silverware. You aren't relying on those plastic wrapped sandwiches or those single use coffee cups and stirs that are so common in a fast paced office setting. You have total control over what you use, which makes it so much easier to ditch the disposables.
Okay, so my next question from you is that why do how can remote jobs help save water?
It's a bit more subtle than the carbon emissions, but it's definitely there. Think about the sheer volume of water it takes to maintain a massive corporate campus, from the industrial cleaning of huge floors and bathrooms to the irrigation of those manicured office lawns. When you shift that workload to individual homes, you're eliminating the waste that comes with operating those giant, high traffic facilities. I'm ready.
Okay, so my
It's
next
just
question from you is that what role does technology play in making remote work greener?
technology is basically the engine that makes the whole green transition possible. First, you have the communication tools, things like Zoom, Slack, and Google Workspace that essentially replace the need for physical travel. Instead of a team flying across the world for a 3-day conference, they can collaborate in real time from their own living rooms, which eliminates tons of jet fuel emissions. Then there's the shift to the cloud. When companies move their data to centralized high efficiency servers rather than running like 100.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how does remote work reduce office waste?
That's a great one. Think about the typical office, mountains of printer paper, those little plastic pods for the coffee machine, and a constant stream of disposable cutlery and napkins from the break room. When people work from home, a lot of that corporate waste just vanishes because you're more likely to use your own reusable mugs and actually think twice before printing a 10-page document. Plus, there's the energy waste from keeping a massive building lit and cooled all day when it's half empty. Does that cover what you were looking for, or do you want to get more specific?
So my next question from you is that why do remote workers use fewer disposable items?
It really comes down to the environment you're in. When you're in a corporate office, there's this culture of convenience that's almost forced on you. You've got the break room filled with plastic stirrers, disposable cups, and those prepackaged snacks that come in 3 layers of plastic. It's just the default setting for a fast paced workday where nobody has time to wash a dish. But at home, you're in your own space. You have a kitchen, a dishwasher, and your favorite mug that you actually like. You're not relying on a vending machine or a catered lunch in a cardboard box. You're making your own food, which usually means way fewer single use plastics and napkins. There's also a psychological shift when you're the one taking the trash out at the end of the week. You're much more waste you're actually generating compared to when a cleaning crew just whisks it away from your desk every night. It's that direct connection to the waste that makes people more mindful. I'm
So my next
listening.
question from you is that how do companies become more eco-friendly through remote work?
For a company, it's a total shift in how they operate. The most obvious win is the real estate. When a company goes remote or hybrid, they can downsize their office space significantly. That means less electricity for lighting, heating, and cooling massive floors of empty cubicles, and way fewer resources spent on maintaining a physical building. It turns a huge corporate overhead into a much smaller, more sustainable footprint. Then there's the digital transformation. To make remote work happen, companies have to ditch the paper trail mentality. They move everything to the cloud, which forces them to adopt digital signatures, online collaboration tools, and virtual filing systems. Once that habit is set, it's very hard to go back to the wasteful ways of the past. Beyond the logistics, it also changes the kind of talent they hire. They can recruit people from all over the world, which means they aren't forcing thousands of employees to relocate to a crowded city, which in itself reduces the strain on local infrastructure and housing. It's essentially a way for a business to decouple its growth from its physical impact on the planet. Does that give you enough detail for the recording, or should I dig deeper into many of those points?
So my next question from you is that how does less construction of office buildings help nature?
This is where it gets really interesting because we're talking about the actual land. When you stop building these massive glass and steel skyscrapers, you're essentially stopping the encroachment on natural habitats. Every time a new office complex goes up, it usually means clearing a plot of land, which often involves cutting down trees and destroying the local ecosystem that animals and insects rely on. By reducing the demand for new construction, we leave more of those green spaces intact, allowing biodiversity to thrive instead of being replaced by a parking lot. Then there's the hidden cost of the materials. Construction is one of the most resource intensive industries on the planet. Think about the sheer amount of concrete and steel required for one building. Producing cement is one of the biggest sources of carbon dioxide emissions globally, and mining for the raw materials like sand and iron ore can absolutely devastate riverbeds and mountainsides. So, by shifting to remote work, we're not just saving energy on the lights, we're reducing the need for the destructive process of building from the ground up. It keeps the soil healthy and prevents the urban heat island effect, where all that concrete absorbs heat and makes cities significantly hotter than the surrounding countryside. It's basically giving nature a chance to keep its space. It really is. It's one of those things where I'm sorry, I totally stepped on your toes there. I got carried away. I'll stay quiet and let you lead the way. What's next? I'm locked in. Whenever you're ready for the next question, I'm here.
Okay, so my next question from you is that can remote jobs reduce deforestation?
Absolutely. And it happens in a few different ways. The most direct connection is what we just talked about with construction. When the demand for massive corporate headquarters and sprawling office parks drops, there's less pressure to clear cut forests to make room for those buildings and the infrastructure that comes with them, like roads and parking lots. Then there's the paper side of things. While we're not completely paperless yet, the shift to a fully remote culture forces a digital first mindset. When your entire team is spread across different time zones, you can't just hand someone a physical folder or print out a stack of memos for a meeting. Everything has to be a PDF, a shared doc, or a cloud based project board. Over time, that massive reduction in corporate paper consumption means fewer trees being harvested for industrial scale printing. There's also a bigger picture angle with urban sprawl. When people aren't forced to live within commuting distance of a city center, it can slow down the expansion of suburbs into rural and forested areas. Instead of building new housing developments that eat into the woods just to be closer to the office, people can stay where they are, which helps keep those natural boundaries a bit more secure. It's a ripple effect. Less demand for the office leads to less demand for the materials and the land, which ultimately leaves more forests standing.
Okay, so my next question from you is that why is digital communication better for the environment?
It mostly comes down to the elimination of the physical footprint. Think about a traditional business meeting. You might have people flying from different cities or driving hours in separate cars, which means tons of fuel burned and carbon emitted before the meeting even starts. With digital communication, that entire physical journey is replaced by a data stream. You're trading 1,000 miles of travel for a few kilowatts of electricity to power a laptop and a router. Then there's the sheer volume of physical materials. Digital communication replaces the need for paper memos, printed reports, and physical mail, which saves not just the trees, but the energy used to manufacture and transport all those materials. Even the ink in printers is often made from petroleum based chemicals that are pretty tough on the planet. And if you look at it from a scale perspective, one video call can replace a dozen smaller in person check ins. By condensing the way we interact into a digital space, we're drastically reducing the overall demand on our physical infrastructure. Fewer roads needed, less traffic congestion, and less wear and tear on the environment. It's essentially moving the noise of business from the physical world into a digital one that has a much lighter touch on nature.
Okay, so my next question from you is that can remote jobs reduce how do remote workers actually? So I'll just ask you the last question that what can governments and business do to make remote work even more environmentally friendly?
That's the perfect way to wrap this up because it moves the conversation from what is happening to what can we actually do. For governments, the biggest move would be investing in green energy infrastructure. Since remote work shifts energy consumption from one big office building to thousands of individual homes, the environmental win only really happens if those homes are powered by wind, solar, or hydro rather than coal and gas. They could also offer tax incentives for companies that prove they've reduced their physical footprint or provide subsidies for remote workers to upgrade to energy efficient appliances and home insulation. Then you have the businesses. They can go beyond just allowing remote work and actually implement green remote policies. This could look like providing stipends for employees to buy carbon neutral hardware or offsetting the energy used by their cloud servers through reforestation projects. They could also encourage digital sobriety, basically, being mindful of the energy costs of massive data stored and unnecessary high res video calls when a simple voice call would do. Ultimately, it's about creating a system where the flexibility of remote work is matched by a commitment to sustainability. If the government provides the green power and the businesses provide the green culture, the environmental benefits we've talked about today would scale up exponentially. Since that was the last question, how did the recording go? Did we hit your 25-minute mark?
Okay, so viewers, this was my talk with Maya on the topic of um, how do remote jobs help the environment. So hope you enjoyed it. So let's meet in another talk with Maya like this. So till then, take care. Allah Hafiz, Pakistan Zindabad.